This is a Best in Climate episode of Earth Feels, where each week your hosts Rose and Christine read to you from some of the best climate-related blogs and articles on the web.
Hello, it's Rose here, and we're now less than 2 weeks away from COP26, which John Kerry, the Special Envoy for Climate in the U.S., has billed as our last best hope to do what scientists tell us we must. This week's Best in Climate episode comes to us from Earth Beat, Stories of Climate Crisis, Faith, and Action. If you listen to our episode 164, entitled Is Tackling Climate Change a Moral Imperative?, you will have heard comments from 10 or more spiritual and religious leaders, all in agreement that more than a mere economic, scientific, or political debate, the climate crisis may actually be the moral dilemma of our time. So today's essay is a follow-up entitled Pope Francis Joins World Leaders in Urgent Climate Appeal Ahead of COP26. Again, it originally appeared in the National Catholic Reporter, NCR, online on October 4th. It was written by Brian Rowe, who is the NCR environmental correspondent. And as always, I'll include all the links. It is republished here as part of Covering Climate Now, a global journalism collaboration, strengthening coverage of the climate story. In response to the grave threat of climate change, heads of the world's major religions united at the Vatican to issue an unprecedented joint appeal to government leaders at next month's Earth Nations Climate Summit, calling for urgent, radical, and responsible action to drastically curb greenhouse gas emissions and for the world's wealthiest countries to lead in healing the planet. Nearly 40 religious figures, among them Pope Francis, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, and Islamic, Jewish, Buddhist, and Hindu leaders also pledged to increase awareness of the climate crisis and actions to address it within their own congregations. Quote, "We are currently at a moment of opportunity and truth. We pray that our human family may unite to save our common home before it is too late," the declaration read. "Future generations will never forgive us if we squander this precious opportunity." End quote. "We have inherited a garden. We must not leave a desert to our children," the faith leaders wrote. The joint statement, issued October 4th, the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of ecology, outlined the expectations of the world's major religions, representing about half the global population, for the COP26 UN Climate Conference, set for November 1st through 12th in Glasgow, Scotland. Quote, "We plead with the international community gathered at COP26 to take speedy, responsible, and shared action to safeguard, restore, and heal our wounded humanity and the home entrusted to our stewardship," the Faith Declaration said. "We appeal to everyone on this planet to join us on this common journey, knowing well that what we can achieve depends not only on opportunities and resources, but also on hope, courage, solidarity, and goodwill." A portion of the statement was read at a Faith and Science Toward COP26 ceremony at the Vatican, where faith leaders, all wearing masks, signed the document. Francis, who signed last, handed the appeal over to Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio and Alok Sharma of Britain, president of COP26. Officials from embassies to the Holy See from both nations, which are co-hosting the climate conference, worked with the Vatican to organize the statement. Sharma described the appeal as a powerful call to action in the world. He called for an alliance of faith leaders and scientists and youth to turn the tide on climate change. Quote, "Doing so requires us all to play our part. Every country and every part of society mounting a global effort led by those most human qualities, reason and morality, the head and the heart, he said. Each religious leader spoke briefly about the need to protect the environment. Those unable to attend because of the coronavirus pandemic sent video messages. At the conclusion, each poured soil into a potted olive tree to be planted in the Vatican gardens. They met again in the afternoon to discuss how faith and science can work together to raise awareness and cooperate further. In prepared remarks for the event, Francis said that the world's religious and spiritual traditions and science both stress the interconnectedness of our world. Recognizing the interrelations among species, he said, reveals not only the harmful effects of human activity on ecosystems, but also possible solutions. Quote, COP26 in Glasgow represents an urgent summons to provide effective responses to the unprecedented ecological crisis and the crisis of values we are presently experiencing, and in this way, to offer concrete hope to future generations. We want to accompany it with our commitment and our spiritual closeness, the Pope said. COP26 will be the first UN climate conference in 2 years. An abbreviated virtual meeting was held in December 2020 because of the coronavirus pandemic. This year's event is viewed as the most consequential climate summit since the 2015 COP21, which produced the landmark Paris Agreement, in which the world's nations committed for the first time to cut emissions in an effort to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The faith leaders who conferred throughout the year in multiple meetings with leading scientists, including Hoesong Lee, chair of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, said that time is running out and that this decade may be the last chance left to restore the planet. Average temperatures have already risen by more than 1 degree Celsius and are on track to reach 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, based on countries' current greenhouse gas emission reduction commitments, according to a recent IPCC report. Quote, the degradation of our common home due to climate change is a symptom of deeper social ills, Joachim von Braun, president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, told the gathering. For this reason, it is essential that in addressing these challenges, science and faith combine forces. End quote. Climate change solutions must include changes in consumption, technological breakthroughs, and policies that recognize that human and ecosystem health are inextricably connected, the scientists said. The religious leaders urged governments to achieve net zero carbon emissions as soon as possible. Wealthier nations, which are the major emitters, must lead that effort, they said, as well as follow through on long-promised financing, $100 billion annually through the Green Climate Fund, to help less industrial nations curb emissions and adapt to climate change. They also urged developed nations to commit to loss and damage payments to less industrialized countries for climate-related destruction that has already occurred. They advocated a new economic model that prioritizes human dignity, inclusivity, ecologically friendly practices over exploitation and excess, and one based not on endless growth and proliferating desires, but on supporting life. The statement also called for special attention to the rights of Indigenous peoples, an end to biodiversity loss, responsible financing by banks and investors, and a just transition to a clean energy economy, with particular attention to employment for people working in the fossil fuel industry. Calling climate change a moral issue, they stress the importance of education and the crucial role of religious traditions in bringing about an ecological conversion among all people. The faith leaders also pledged to more active political participation on environmental issues and to take actions within their own communities to reduce emissions, pursue sustainability in their buildings and properties, encourage simpler lifestyles, seek out ethically produced goods and services, and apply environmentally and socially responsible standards to investments, including shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energy. An interfaith program called Faith Plans for People and Planet, aimed at leveraging religious groups' assets and investments, was also launched on October 4th. To involve Catholics, the Vatican is creating Laudato Si Action Platform, a 7-year roadmap to sustainability for all types of Catholic institutions, from families and dioceses to hospitals and schools. Religious leaders and institutions have increasingly turned attention to climate change in recent years. Climate negotiators have said Francis's encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, along with statements from other faith leaders and the world's bishops, had a positive influence on COP21 in 2015. The hope is that this new interreligious appeal will yield similar results in Glasgow. More and more, the Vatican has emphasized the importance of a united religious voice on climate change. In November of 2020, the Vatican's Council on Interreligious Dialogue hosted a multi-day interfaith event to mark the 5-year anniversary of Laudato Si. And in September, Francis joined Bartholomew and Archbishop Justin Welby of Canterbury in a first-ever joint message on environmental sustainability by the 3 Christian leaders. Plans for the October 4th faith appeal began in January. Since then, faith leaders have met 8 times with scientists, including Lee of the IPCC and the heads of the Pontifical Academies of Sciences and Social Sciences. Before the event, Von Braun told Earthbeat he was pleasantly surprised with the faith leaders' openness to scientific advice and is optimistic the statement will deliver a powerful message to political leaders at COP26. Quote, "This summit comes at a point in time where the world knows more, is concerned more, and wants to see more action, and the people are moving together. That's why this new alliance between science and faith will matter at COP26, he said. So there you have it, a very powerful meeting between science and religion. As a bonus this week, I want to do an additional reading, an open letter to political leaders participating in COP26. And I'll include a link for you to add your signature to this petition. Essentially, it's stressing to all leaders the responsibility to care for our common home and our common family. It's called the Healthy Planet, Healthy People petition. Dear COP15 President Lee Ganji, COP26 President Alok Sharma, and all political leaders participating in COP15 and COP26. United in solidarity with the most vulnerable, we Catholics and other people of faith implore you to take action in line with the science for all of creation at this year's COP15 and COP26. Our common home and our common family are suffering. The COVID-19 crisis has been yet another alarming symptom of an ecological emergency. Humankind cannot be healthy on a sick planet. At the Earth Day Summit in April, Pope Francis said, quote, "We know that one does not emerge from a crisis the same. We emerge either better or worse. We need to ensure that the environment is cleaner, purer, and that it is conserved. We must care for nature so that nature may care for us." End quote. Our planet's biodiversity is disintegrating at the hands of humans. Biologists estimate that we are driving species to extinction at a rate of about 1,000 times faster than without human influence. In parallel, the worsening climate crisis is causing rising sea levels and more extreme weather, devastating lives and livelihoods. This interconnected crisis is impacting most adversely on our poorest sisters and brothers across the planet who have done the least to cause it. But none of us, rich or poor, are immune. The climate crisis and biodiversity collapse are twin crises. A warming planet is exacerbating the spiraling loss of blameless species, and further loss of nature will jeopardize our capacity to deliver on the 1.5 degree limit to global warming. We are hurtling towards a global catastrophe that looks to be irreversible for our common home, with tragic loss of life across all creation, unless we act now with great urgency. Acting in line with the best available science on both the climate and biodiversity crisis is fundamental for human and planetary health and survival. We must also open our hearts, believers and non-believers alike, to the right of all species to exist. All life, human and other than human, holds intrinsic value. Their right to thrive is not dependent on serving humanity, but is a way to give glory to the Creator. Despite the overwhelming scientific evidence and numerous national declarations of climate and ecological emergencies, world leaders have not yet to act commensurate with the scientific and moral urgency. We must grieve for lives and life lost, and we must do better. As a faith community, we know there is always a way out. We can always redirect our steps. From Laudato Si 61. We must recognize that Indigenous peoples and local communities are at the center of protecting nature, and we must support them. Quote, when they remain on their land, they themselves care for it best. End quote. Laudato Si 146. We urge you, leaders, at the two COPs and at the G7 and G20 to, first, explicitly recognize human-induced climate change and biodiversity as part of one and the same crisis. Acknowledge the need for ambitious, integrated, and transformative action that responds to both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Secondly, urgently affirm the Paris Agreement to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and to a new biodiversity global goal of 50% of conservation of lands and waters and restoration and sustainable management of all the rest of land and water bodies to ensure no more biodiversity loss. And thirdly, recognize the ecological debt of high-income nations and agree to reform the financial system and cancellation of debt so that all countries can restart economies that work for all peoples and the planet. To achieve this, all governments must increase ambition, update near-term national targets on climate and biodiversity action to reflect their fair national share of the global effort to deliver on 1.5 degrees Celsius limit to warming and a new global goal of 50% protection of nature. Fulfill promises, ensure delivery of existing financial commitments, and agree new targets to support adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage in developing countries. Catalyze transformation, stop all new fossil fuel infrastructure, and redirect destructive subsidies towards socially responsible renewable energy and agroecological farming approaches. Prioritize rights. Reaffirm and respect obligations to protect and respect human rights, including in particular the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities in climate and biodiversity action. With Pope Francis leading us, we pray that you and all political leaders throughout the world who are tasked with the duty to make life-saving decisions in this critical year will bring us out better from the COVID-19 crisis toward an equitable common home for all life, for generations to come. As Pope Francis said to the world leaders at Earth Summit Day in April, quote, we have the means to rise up to the challenge. It is time to act. Again, I will include a link to that petition for you to sign and send to world leaders. I'm sure you feel the sense of urgency, like we all do. Please use your voice and your signature. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.
That's this week's episode of Best in Climate for Earth Feels.
Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for